last part of why the assault bike is so hard. So what we're gonna be doing today is talking about biomechanics first, and then we're gonna put everything together. So we're gonna take the information from the first two videos with the information from this video, and I'm gonna try to explain you how to use all that knowledge to your advantage, right? So the idea is there that you know how to use the bike better for whatever it is that you want. Good. The first thing you need to know is what biomechanics are. So biomechanics is the science of applying the law of mechanics, physical mechanics, to living structures, to biological structures, in our case to yourself. So what we want to know is how does your body interacts with the bike? What kind of motions are there? What muscle groups are being used? So what? Some of the questions that we're gonna be answering is like, do heavier athletes benefit in the assault bike? Do shorter, taller athletes benefit from the bike? You know, all these things that people usually talk about and like there's no real understanding. So we're gonna analyze that very, very well. Good. So let's go ahead and start. So I'm gonna take you to the whiteboard. Let's analyze how pedaling works, and then I'll take you to the garage and we'll go to the bike and see. We'll try to put all the biomechanics together. So in order to understand the biomechanics of pedaling, what we're going to do is we're going to break each pedal, each revolution in parts. So in this amazing drawing, what you see here, the pedals, this is the plate, this is the little cog, and this orange thing is the chain. So the first thing that we're going to do is imagine your foot is here and we're going in this direction, we're pedaling like this. So we're gonna divide this first semicircle, we're gonna call it the positive part, and this second semicircle we're gonna call it the negative part. And the positive part is when the leg is going this way, and the negative part is when the leg is going up, right? And we know that the legs are gonna be, while one is doing the positive part, the other one is gonna do the negative part, and so on. Good. That is important because the muscles that we use for the positive part are gonna be different than the muscles that we use for the negative part, mostly. So we in turn are gonna divide the positive part in two parts. The first quarter, the first fourth of the whole revolution is we're gonna call it the butt part, because guess what? That's when you use your butt. And the second part is where we use mostly the quads. So when you're in this positive part, which is where most of the strength is applied, the real part, the important part for pedaling, right? Like when we push down, these are the muscles involved. So check this video that I'm gonna show you right now on why are we using those muscles, and you'll understand this correctly. And so let's review what we have done. So if I start here, I'm starting with the positive, and I'm doing a quarter of the revolution, that's butt. I'm gonna do a quarter of the revolution, that's quads, and then I'm gonna do the negative. Good. Okay, so now we saw that in real life. Now I want you to track my knee. And so if you track my knee when I do the first quarter of the positive, what you'll see is that my knee moves from here to here. So it actually moves from up to down and back. In the first quarter of the revolution, my knee is doing this, right? Which is a little bit counterintuitive. And in the second part in the second quarter of the positive, I just extend the knee. Good. And then the whole negative, I am just pulling my knee up, right? But in the first quarter, what I want you to really notice is that the knee goes from up and forward to down and back, right? Good, guys. That is important for the following. If you do this on your own home, when you are if you keep your leg straight and pull the leg back, you'll feel your butt and your quad engage and your hamstring engaging. So that first part of the pedal, if you do it like this, you're not gonna feel it, but as soon as you try to have your leg straight and pull back, you're gonna feel all those muscles of that, all the muscles from the back of the leg working. So the first quarter of that pedal is gonna be butt and hams, which is what we said. And the second part, when I'm extending the leg, if you imagine that you were killing a roach, and really push and kill that roach with anger, you're gonna feel your quad engaged, because your quad is a knee extender, right? And so the first part, butt and hamstring, the second part, quad. When I bring the knee back up on the negative, that is mostly hamstrings. That is mostly hamstrings. Good. Now that you understood that, now that you understand positive and negative, there's a few things that you should take into consideration. There's a lot of coaches that in cycling recommend lifting the leg that is going up, right, in the negative part. Just lift it a little bit, try to pull the pedal up. And most cyclists and athletes will think that it's because the advantage of that is that I'm using the muscles, the hamstrings, to pull that pedal up. But really what I'm doing is I'm releasing a little bit of force, so that when I push with the other leg, there's less effort. Because when I pull, the weight of my leg is not dead on the pedal, and so when I'm doing the positive, I don't have to do the effort of pedaling plus the effort of moving this other leg that is dead. And so the pulling works for that. But the contribution to, of strength from the pulling aspect of the negative is not very big, and we know that. That's also why a lot of cyclist coaches will tell you, like, don't worry too much about it. There's not gonna be a lot of a big effect. I think for most athletes there's a little bit of effect there on the negative part. So if you're cycling, play with like lifting a little bit your legs, and that that is one of the reasons, not the main one for sure, but that's one of the reasons that we use clips, like those shoes that attach to the pedal. Again, not one of the main reasons, but now we have to take into consideration what happens with the handles, right? Because what we know is that in the assault bike, we're gonna have all these mechanics, but we're also gonna be adding the handles. So let's go over to the bike and check what happens there. Handles. So the first thing to notice is that when this leg is on the positive, this arm is pressing, and when this leg is on the positive, this arm is pressing. So if we stay true to the cyclist teaching of prioritizing the positive part of pedaling, we should also stay true to the pressing. Like keep working the pressing on this guy. Let's aid this leg mostly by pressing with this arm, and I'll tell you why. It's gonna be very hard, and you could try it. It's gonna be harder mentally and neurologically to actually be thinking about first pulling and pulling at the same time, right? So if you're gonna press with this arm and pull with this arm at the same, and pull with the other one as you press, your brain is gonna get really confused. So you're gonna have to choose between pulling or pressing, right? And you're gonna have a better mechanical advantage of using the diagonality of your body. Your body really enjoys working diagonally. Think about rotation forces and all the sort and all those things. And so I think you're gonna get way better results by prioritizing the pressing. Right? So I'm thinking pressing with the leg, pressing with the arm. Doesn't mean that you cannot pull with the arms. There will be some advantage, but it's not gonna be as big. Good. That is the first thing. The second thing that you should take into account, and this is not so much biomechanical as it is physiological, which brings us back to our second video, is even though we want to use the arms a lot, you have to be careful with how much you use them, because as we have said several times, this bike is going to have high anaerobic demands, and so the muscles of the arms are small. Depends on who you are, of course, but they tend to be smaller, and so if you kill those muscles, your body's gonna have to use all the aerobic systems to try to make up for the slacking part of the system, and you're not gonna be able to push really hard, right? And so you don't want to kill your arms really hard. You want to still prioritize legs, right? And so be smart on how you use the arms there. Good. And the last thing that you should take into consideration there in terms of biomechanics is that even though we're gonna be doing diagonal motions, you want to be very efficient on how you do that. And the most efficient way to transfer power from the core to the extremities is by trying to stay very centered, right? If you're like going in an auto sprint and you need to start fast, a little bit of rotation is gonna help you, but over time that's not gonna work very well. So stay centered. Good. That finishes up with our biomechanical talk. How does this add to the why is the assault bike so hard? We probably already answered that question we already answered that question in the second part, but from the biomechanics point of view, the only advantage that you could have biomechanically would be the use of the handles. And as I have said there, you have some advantage there, but it's not a long-term advantage, right? Like, because you cannot really kill your system with the arms, and so that's why they will aid you, but they will not aid you that much. They're there mostly to like mess with you. You have to be really smart with them, and so apart from that, the biomechanics are the same of the bike, so they're not gonna give you anything new. Now, there's a little discussion here that I'm gonna introduce before we move into how to program for the assault, and is how those particular anatomies play a role here. Well, you'll see. We said that the most important part is to prioritize the positive aspect. If you're a person that has long legs, and especially a long femur, you're gonna have mechanical advantage because your levers for the positive part are gonna be longer. A person that has very short legs, usually short people, are gonna have levers that are very short. If you're thinking in terms of squatting, a short person is gonna get in the deeper squat of their lives, when a tall person or a person with a long femur, especially in this first squat of the positive part, which is the one that requires the most strength. Think about when you're starting a bike, like the light is just red and you start in a weird gear, and you have to really put on that first part. That first part for a long person, the angle is gonna be very high, and they're gonna have a mechanical advantage, longer arm to press down. So long legs and long femurs are really gonna help. There's another, that's the first thing. There's another idea or theory that I hear a lot, that is that heavy people has an advantage. Not really. Heavy people tend to be, the heavier you are, the more anaerobic power you tend to be able to produce. That's just how it is. You have bigger muscles, so your anaerobic power is just a little bit higher. Not always, but most of the time. And so naturally, that's gonna transfer to the bike. But you'll see that those people that is heavier but doesn't have aerobic capacity is not gonna last long on the bike, and so weight there is not really gonna transfer that much. What does transfer is strength, and strength it is definitely related with mass. It's definitely correlated with mass, but it's not causal of mass. So strength is gonna help you. Anaerobic power is gonna help you, but that's just saying like being better at the bike is being better at the bike. Good, and as a a footnote of all those anatomical discussions, I think it's important. Sorry about Bowie. I think it's important to have those discussions and know your anatomy and how it interacts with whatever machine or movement you're using, but also take into account that those anatomical differences are mostly only gonna mess with you if you're trying to be professional. So if you want to play basketball and you're 5'3", you're never gonna make it to the NBA. Fine. Doesn't mean you cannot be amazing at basketball. Doesn't mean that you can be like 95% in the world. It just means that you're not gonna be elite. So don't use that as an excuse, because you can get better than anybody else most of the time. So for the bike, yeah, it's true. A long femur is gonna give you an advantage. But what's gonna give you an advantage is training smarter for longer. And so, maybe a better brain is the way to go. I don't know. Anyhow, now let's move forward and let's talk about the ways on how to program for this machine.
Awesome, guys. So let's put it all together. So the question that we're trying to answer now is how to use this machine to your advantage. So there's several ways that I have used this machine in the past, that has helped me building a lot of fitness for my athletes. So let me walk you through all of them, and on each one we'll use some of the things that we have learned, and it will like help you put the whole thing together. So the first thing that this machine is really good at is at gauging at measuring your aerobic capacity. We have said all the time that this machine requires a lot of strength, requires a lot of anaerobic power, and so on. So how do we use that to measure your aerobic capacity? Very simple. We do an effort test. We do a step test. So let me tell you how does the test work, and then I'll explain it a little bit. So the test works the following way. You make your athlete jump on the bike. You are not gonna do this yourself. This is horrible. So you make somebody else do it. So you put your athlete on the bike. You start that athlete at a given RPM, at a given number of revolutions per minute. Let's say 60. And for a 2 minutes or 3 minutes interval, you ask that athlete to keep that pace. And then you step it up. So for the next 2 or 3 minutes, you're gonna ask your athlete to go at 62 RPM or 61, depends on the athlete. And then you keep going like that, right? Like for the 4 to 6, 64 RPM, and so on. And what you wanna measure is where does your athlete dies? Where can he or she not sustain the pace? You can adjust the details like at what RPM do you start, how big start the jump from like 58 to 50, and so on. But the theory is pretty much the same. This is a classic effort test in which what we're doing is we're controlling very well the anaerobic system. We're killing your anaerobic system. We're putting it into overdrive, so the aerobic system has to like do more work until it cannot keep up with the demands of the anaerobic system. Good. We know that if you go farther away in this test, just because I'm being able to control the anaerobic input so much, it's not because you're better at pacing, it's not because you had a lot of exposure to this test, it's just because your body is better at converting the oxygen that is getting to the air into anaerobic power, right? It's not because you are like stronger, it's just that you're better at converting oxygen into energy. So if you go a little bit farther on the test, your body has been better at that. It's just a test on aerobic capacity. That is the first thing. This is gonna be a much better test than say doing 100 calories per time, right? Like that is not gonna give you the precision that you need, because you can change the strategy, change the pacing sometimes, drive the anaerobic system harder. There's no control, right? Like the same for a 10-minute test or a 25-minute test or anything of that sort. There's a lot of noise in those kind of testing. The step test, everything is control, and this is a kind of test that is very common for physiotherapists or for sports doctors and so on. It's a great measure of cardiovascular work. Anyhow, and you can do this on your own very easily if you do it every 2 or 3 months, especially if you're doing any aerobic intervention. Is gonna be very informative. So that's number one. Okay, way number 2. This machine can be awesome for runners or triathletes or any kind of endurance athlete that is a little bit short on time, right? Why do I say that? Because with this machine we can create a lot of anaerobic depletion fast, right? So if let's say you have an athlete that like is a long distance runner and the last part of a run is really hard, it's hard to get him to train that last part of a run consistently. If it's a marathoner, how do you train the 6 miles after the 20 miles? You cannot make that athlete run marathons all day long. They will not be able to do that. So we have to create a context in which we deplete the legs so much that they're in a similar place as if they would be at the end of a marathon, for example. And so the bike is gonna be really good for that. So what you're going to do is you're gonna try to deplete your anaerobic system fast, by doing lots of intervals in which the anaerobic demands are controlled but high. So you're depleting that muscle, and then you make your athlete run, right? And so a very common scheme that I use with both my runners and my triathletes is I will make them do intervals on that bike, all for intervals. I sometimes mix them with like squats and lunges, with controlled rests and controlled intensity. So I'm always upping up the anaerobic demands. And then once they're done with that, 10 or 12 minutes, depends on how tired I want those legs to be, I will make them run long intervals, and that builds a lot of capacity. And so anytime that you need to create contexts in which you need anaerobic, like tired legs without a lot of muscle fatigue, like you could say like, yeah, Juan, why don't we do heavy sets of squats before running? And that will not give you a similar stimulus, just because you will deplete the CNS system, like the central nervous system. You will deplete all the structural muscles that are keeping that bike, and you will deplete the legs in a different way, right? Like you're gonna be targeting the phosphatic system too much and not the glycolytic pace too much, and so you need a specific kind of tiredness, and so the bike is excellent for that. There's a third way to use this machine, and it's to produce power really fast in controlled bouts. So the intervals of like 10 to 20 seconds of all out with like a 2 to 3 rest ratio, like say you go out for 20 seconds and you rest for 40, are gonna be awesome on the bike, because they're not gonna deplete you that much in terms of targeting the central nervous system as you would do with like heavy lifting or like jump or anything very explosive. But you'll be able to produce a lot of power super fast in a movement that is not gonna require a lot of technique. So you're gonna be targeting those fast energy production systems, those anaerobic systems, in a very controlled manner, and you're gonna be able to measure that power output really fast and really accurately. So if the power output drops too much, you know that your athlete is done and you're gonna stop with those intervals, right? So that generation of fast power in the anaerobic systems from 0 to 20 seconds, the bike is gonna be excellent for that. Also, you're gonna have enough recovery from the system, from the legs and the arms, so that you know that you're gonna be able to sustain those intervals for a little bit of longer time. And so that's gonna build you those systems very well. This bike is not gonna be awesome to build, like it's awesome to measure aerobic capacity. It's not gonna be awesome to build aerobic capacity by itself. So jumping on that bike for 20 to 30 seconds is not gonna, for 20 to 30 minutes, it might not be the best way to build aerobic capacity. Why? Because the anaerobic demands are so high that you will have to have too much, like remember, go back to video 2, you will have to have cadences too high in order for your aerobic system to be able to keep up with the thing. So that's why, for example, the classic most common test that people will do in the regular CrossFit gym here is 10 minutes, because 20 minutes will really destroy you, and you will be able to actually train the aerobic capacity. The anaerobic capacity will get in the way. Think about, like, for example, something like rowing. There's in rowing, especially in indoor rowing, you'll find that person that can only row at 24 strokes per minute and never gets better. And it's because they're never targeting their aerobic capacity. They're always producing high anaerobic power, powerful strokes, but they're not moving themselves very fast. And so they're not targeting that aerobic system, and so they're always winded, they're always over breathing. And so in the rowing, you can change that by forcing your athletes to do different stroke rates. In the bike, you cannot do that. And so if you're training your aerobic capacity there, and you cannot really have a higher RPM, which most of us are not going to be able, the anaerobic demands are gonna be so high that you're not gonna be able to sustain the pace. You're gonna end up dropping the speed too much. The aerobic systems are not gonna be challenged, and so it's not gonna be very good for that. It's gonna be really good if you actually mix that bike with something else, so that like you modulate those anaerobic demands. And so if you do, like, for example, running and biking or something like that, in which like you just ramp up the anaerobic demands for a second and then allow your body to like keep it up with the aerobic demands, then you can build a lot of aerobic capacity, but not on its own. Okay, so the bike has five fifth part. So the bike is not great at like building a lot of aerobic capacity. It can help, but it's not gonna be your go-to, right? It's gonna be great to build anaerobic capacity. So, and to really complement other movements that require anaerobic capacity. So, for example, think about if you're trying to get really good at building more endurance on your pull-ups, right? Like you're not gonna be able to do 3 hours of pull-ups unless like you're one of the wizards that does that. But like pull-ups are gonna be a movement that requires a lot of anaerobic capacity, and so in order to get good at that, you're gonna need a stimulus that builds that anaerobic capacity and that requires you to match that with aerobic capacity. So for example, what I do with my athletes when I'm trying to build them more, not strength but capacity on an anaerobic movement like pull-ups or push-ups or muscle ups or whatever that is I mix those movements with the bike. Why the bike? Because let's say that you're doing pull-ups. If I mix pull-ups on the bike is gonna allow me to like give my athlete a break from the skill specific demands of the movement, right? Like I'm gonna gonna be able to give them a little bit of a break in the arms on the, if it's a high skill movement like a muscle up, the brain that has to produce all that power and the coordination to produce the muscle up, but I'm gonna be able to still have a high anaerobic demand and a high aerobic demand, which is very similar to what they will get in the muscle ups by biking. So I combine those two movements and it allows me to build them capacity without tiring them that much. So for that kind of thing is excellent. If you wanted, for example, to do the same logic that I just described with the rower, you could, as long as you're keeping you're kind of targeting the anaerobic and aerobic demands accordingly, right? Good. That is the fifth way. Good. And the last way to use this machine is as a part of a cross-training program, a CrossFit program, a general physical preparedness program, or however you want to call it, which is where this machine comes from. Purpose always matters, right? We in the cross-training world, we get sloppy with that because we're like thinking about like general, and so whatever is the stimulus, like it doesn't matter. We think too much about performance, too little about stimulus. Those are easily confused. And so you can use this machine for general physical preparedness as long as you're looking for context. So how is that? How is your and context matters, but not so much. Not only what's around that bike, what other movements you're pairing it, but also your particular athlete, right? So what tends to happen is that if you don't understand very well how high the anaerobic demands are on the bike, and you ask of your athlete more than he or she can give you, those workouts are not going to be very productive because they're going to have to drop power output way too low. And so first thing that you need to take into account is the personal capacity of your athlete, both in the anaerobic and the aerobic realms. That's hard to know for each athlete, but if you know your athlete, you know what's their capacity there. Of course, aerobic and anaerobic capacity are not separated as we think conceptually, but like you can make the some certain concessions there. And the other thing is that you have to take into account the context of on when you're putting your workouts. People use this on intervals quite often, and don't take into account that recovery capacity for this machine is very different from other machines in which the athlete can modulate their power output more, right? And so some athletes will be really good at recovery from aerobic dominant situations, and some athletes will be way better to recover from anaerobic dominant situations, and so intervals are going to be complicated to program with accurate rest periods if you don't know your athlete very well. But also if you're programming this as a part of a cross-training protocol in which there's a lot of other movements involved, you really have to take into account what's happening to the individual muscles. Because if, for example, you're pairing this with squats or jumping, jump box or whatever, the anaerobic demands are gonna be higher and higher, which means that your athlete is gonna drop RPMs too much, which means that the aerobic capacity is not gonna be working, and that workout is just not gonna be as productive, right? In other movements, this is not so true because the athlete can modulate the pace, can modulate the demands way better. In this one, things are so fixed as we saw in the first video that all these things have to be taken into account and personalized very, very well. Yeah, but in general, this machine is going to be great for a cross-training program, just because if you're smart on how to use it and you get a little bit creative, you can, and you understand what you want from the workout in terms of anaerobic or aerobic demands, you're going to be able to precisely modulate what you want very, very well. And the second thing is that it doesn't require a lot of technique, although yes, you saw in this video some technique is going to be really useful. It's not as non-technical as you would believe. So anyhow, so this is a very useful machine. I hope you you get something out of it and can design something for yourself here on how to use it. And yeah, give it a try. Let me know if you have any questions or anything.